We've got another presentation from the P5010 Chapter 9, Preventive Medicine for Ground Forces, and this presentation is going to be focused on food in the field. Introduction. Consumption of food contaminated with disease-causing microorganisms can result in outbreaks of foodborne illness and compromise the combat readiness of the unit. The field can exacerbate conditions that lead to foodborne illness. Conditions like improper storage, inadequate protection, and then poor food handler sanitation. It's difficult enough to maintain sanitary food service units in controlled conditions, but the field can certainly exacerbate those conditions. Transportation of food. Vehicles used for transporting food must be clean and completely enclosed if possible. Vehicles used for the transportation of garbage, trash, chemicals, petroleum products, or similar materials cannot be used to transport food. If bulk quantities of perishable food are going to be transported over considerable distances, refrigerated containers must be used. Moving on to storage. All food items are to be inspected by the food service officer. These inspections are typically limited to identification, count, and condition. If fitness of items is questionable, so the food service officer is doing their inspection and they suspect that some food might be contaminated or may not have been maintained in the appropriate temperature, or if food was purchased on the local market, so we're in another country and we're purchasing food to serve to our troops, that food also needs to be inspected by the medical department representative. So your food service officer, your FSO, needs to request an inspection from the MDR, from your medical department representative. Still discussing storage, and we're going to talk about a couple of rules when it comes to field refrigeration. So temperature readings in field refrigerators and freezers must be recorded and logged with each meal period, or at least 3 times per day. Refrigerated spaces, they need to be emptied and thoroughly cleaned at least once per week. They also must be defrosted whenever there's a frost accumulation on the cooling coils that exceeds 1/4 of an inch. Filled reefers will be maintained at or below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and our freezers are going to be below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Our semi-perishable foods like potatoes, onions, lettuce, these will be stored in a dry place on pallets to allow air circulation and protect against decay, spoilage, and vermin infestation. And then our non-perishable canned foods, they too must be palletized. That way we can allow that air circulation and minimize harborage of vermin. Preparation and serving of food in the field. So chopping and grinding of meat in the field is prohibited. None of that's going to be going on. Frozen food should be thawed under refrigeration. If thawing in room temperature, we've got to follow a couple rules. Okay, so if we're going to thaw something at room temperature, the product needs to be cooked as soon as possible once it's thawed. Room temperature must not exceed 80 degrees. So if you're going to go with room temperature, preferably we defrost it in refrigeration. But if we're going with room temperature, that room cannot be warmer than 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Meat, poultry, and fish must remain in their original sealed wrappers if we're defrosting that at room temperature. If we're defrosting any kind of meat products, we've got to keep it in the wrappers. And then precautions are taken to ensure that potentially hazardous foods are not allowed to remain at room temperature once thawed. And the medical department representative needs to be notified anytime we are thawing food at room temperature. All right, and thawed foods must never be refrozen. We can't thaw it out and like, oh, never mind, we're not going to prepare that. Let's throw it back in the freezer. That's prohibited. If we thaw something, it can never be refrozen. All right, and then saving of leftovers in the field is strictly prohibited. Even if it's something on a serving line that we, keep in that temperature range, we still cannot reserve it later. There are no leftovers in the field. It's just too risky, and we don't want to spread a foodborne illness throughout the unit. All right, and no self-service ice machines will be in field messes, and units with ice machines. If there is an ice machine in the field, the scoop needs to be made out of an impervious metal, and that metal will be stored in a metal bracket within the ice bin. And it's also important that when the ice bin is full, that the ice doesn't cover the scoop. Okay, so the scoop, impervious metal, stored in a bracket within the ice bin and not covered up by the ice when the ice machine is full. Continuing with preparation and serving of food in the field. Sandwiches should be prepared as close as possible to serving time. Condiments like mayonnaise or relish or anything like that, they need to be provided in individual packages. We've got to take special precautions and do certain things whenever we obtain fruits and vegetables from a local economy, especially if we suspect this is a place that might use night soil. And what night soil is when human feces is used to fertilize the soil. So if we obtain some local fruits and vegetables, we've got to make sure that we soak them in chlorinated water, right? And that chlorinated water needs to be at least 100 parts per million of free available chlorine in that water, and we've got to soak them for at least 15 minutes. Or alternatively, we can do 50 parts per million of free available chlorine solution, but that's needs to be held for 30 minutes. Okay, so 100 parts per million free available chlorine for 15 minutes for those fruits and vegetables we buy in the local economy, or 50 parts per million for 30 minutes. If we're serving individual milk cartons, they must be displayed in drainable trays containing ice. And then we've got to abide by what's called the 4-hour time rule, which means that states potentially hazardous foods, which have been held at temperatures between 40 to 140 degrees for more than 4 hours cumulative time, must be disposed of as garbage. Okay, so if we're within that 40 to 140 and it's a hazardous food, it's got a 4-hour timeline on it, 4-hour life on it, and then it's disposed of as garbage. Moving on to mess facilities and equipment, we're going to discuss the dishwashing battery. So in the field, you can make a dishwashing unit, and we can set it up by using 5 32-gallon galvanized steel garbage cans and immersion heaters. Right, so you're going to take 5 cans, right? So right here, this is a galvanized trash can, 32 gallons. This right here is an immersion heater. This right here is going to heat up that water. All right, so you're going to set it up with 5 cans, and each one of these cans is going to have a particular purpose. In can 1, you're just going to use that to scrape and collect the garbage. You're just going to scrape the plates and the silverware clean and collect it in can 1. Can 2 is going to have your pre-wash. It's going to have a hot detergent solution and a brush. Can 3 is where most of your washing is going to be occurring. Okay, so that's your washing can, and it also is going to have a hot detergent solution and a brush. Can 4 is rinsing can. All right, it'll contain water held at a roiling boil. So you'll have to use little clamps to submerge the utensils and everything and all the field mess equipment into there. And a lot of times you can make those clamps out of hangers or some sort of metal. And then your 5th can, your final can, that's your final sanitation can. All right, and that's going to be to rinse, and it will contain clean hot water and be held to a roiling boil. Okay, and then the rules for changing this water depends on how messed up it gets. You just kind of continuously monitor it, and if you start to see your rinsing and your final sanitation water is starting to get dirty, change it out, clean it out, and then go ahead and set them right back up. Okay, can 1, collecting the garbage, just kind of scrape the trays. Pre-wash in part 2 with hot detergent solution and a brush. 3, the washing one with a hot detergent solution and brush. And then 4, that's where you're going to go ahead and rinse, and you're going to have water held at a rolling boil. And then your final sanitation, you're going to rinse, and it'll have a water held at a boil as well. Okay, and then you're going to allow your stuff to air dry. Mess gear will be air dried only. No dishcloths are permitted in the field. Moving on to MREs, meal ready to eat. So an MRE has a shelf life of approximately 48 months. When they are stored in warehouses, they should be stored off the deck and no more than 3 pallets high. 48 months on the shelf life. Do not store them more than 3 pallets high. We inspect MREs by dumping the contents onto a 36-inch by 36-inch smooth white paper surface. And you're going to dump the contents out. You're going to inspect them, looking to see if anything's spoiled, looking to see if there's any signs of any kind of insect infestation. You're also going to inspect the folds and the seams of the packages to see if there's any insect penetration or insect debris. MREs are prone to infestations by certain stored product pests. Pests like the lesser grain borer beetle, the warehouse beetle, the cigarette beetle, the red flower beetle, and the confused flower beetle. Okay, these are all stored product pests that can get into MREs, and your shipboard pest control manual, that'll have more information on these stored product pests. T-rations. T-rations is like a big MRE. All right, so it's comprised of a hermetically sealed self-heating tray pack. It has 36 servings per pack. Does not require refrigeration. After the initial heating, unopened tray packs can be reused. Okay, so if we heated one of these guys up and we didn't open it up, and it wasn't served, we didn't open it up, we can reuse it, if it's marked with the time and the date of the initial heating, and it must be served at the next period, okay? Or it's going to be discarded. So say we heat up this corned beef hash for breakfast, but we didn't get to opening it up, we didn't serve it, we can keep it, right? Just mark the date and the time on there, and then serve it at lunch. But if we don't get rid of it at lunch, we got to throw it away. All right, let's review what we've gone over so far. How must fruits and vegetables obtained from the local economy be prepared prior to use? How are we going to prepare fruits and vegetables we buy off a local market prior to using them? Well, we're going to soak them in 100 parts per million free available chlorine for 15 minutes, or we can do 50 parts per million free available chlorine for 30 minutes. How often are field refrigerator temperatures logged? How often do we have to record a temperature if we've got a refrigerator out in the field? We've got to do that with every meal period, or at least 3 times per day. How often are refrigerated spaces emptied and thoroughly cleaned? How often in the field are refrigerated spaces emptied and thoroughly cleaned? You've got to do that at least once per week. How many 32-gallon galvanized trash cans can be used to assemble a field dishwashing battery? How many trash cans are you going to use to assemble that dishwashing battery? You're going to use 5. Which can in the 5-can dishwashing battery is used for rinsing? Which can is used for rinsing? That's going to be can 4, right? Your 4th can. Your 1st can, you're going to collect your trash. Your 2nd can is your pre-wash. Your 3rd can is your washing can. 4th can, rinsing. 5th can, final sanitation. What is the shelf life of an MRE? What is the shelf life of the MREs? They've got a 48-month shelf life, 48 months. How high can MRE pallets be stacked when storing? Right? You've got a bunch of MREs in the warehouse. How many pallets high can you store them? You can put them 3 high, no more than 3 pallets high. How many servings are in the typical T-ration tray pack? How many servings are in the typical T-ration tray pack? Well, that's about 36. All right, that wraps us up for the Chapter 9 P5010, just focused on the food part of that for your preventative medicine for ground forces. As always, I hope these videos help. Keep studying.